Oh yeah, and just as a reminder, you probably saw the notification that this meeting will be recorded. For anybody who is unable to attend for any reason, or if there's somebody who you'd like to be able to see this training after this one ends, this session will be recorded, and there'll also be it'll be uploaded, and there'll be a video course up in Buckeye Learn where you'll be able to log back in and watch it pretty much on demand. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so here, and then we'll wrap this up and then get started, get you introduced to who will be on the training session for you today. Looks like we've got about 3/4 of the folks have answered the poll yet so far. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap up that poll now, and then we'll get started with the slideshow. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people are excited about being able to have one single system for planning their projects from beginning to end. And really, truly, that's what Adaptive lets us do. It's one kind of integrated system that will talk to all of the other OSU systems that will be very useful in the years to come for being able to plan. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. My name is Kevin Markolowski. I'm a capital planner in Columbus's Office of Planning, Architecture, and Real Estate, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about Adaptive Insights. Adaptive is our cloud corporate performance management solution, CPM. It will be replacing the CNI, the Capital Needs Inventory System, as well as the FOD project intake tool. However, it is going to be going live with capital planning first. And then for the rest of the projects in early 2021. So if you're questioning why I'm talking about capital planning so much, and that's not something you're geared towards, just know that in the future you will be using this tool for entering project requests. And a lot of what you'll be hearing today is completely will be pretty much exactly the same for just general project requests as well. So just know this will be geared towards capital planning, but the concepts will apply to any project request. So Adaptive was launched at Ohio State at the end of June, first to manage the capital plan, and it will be replacing the CNI system, which introduced in 2012 was just meant to be around for a year or two while a new system was investigated and implemented. But today we're 8 years later still using the CNI system. So we're finally at a point now where we have a good system that will be useful for us for all of our capital planning needs. Ultimately, what Adaptive will let you do is replace all of the Excel spreadsheets that you have in your unit, put everything just in one place, and then also be able to view after projects have been approved and are implemented, you'll be able to see what projects were approved in what capital plan year. And you'll also be able to use it for long-term planning as well. So if you have projects that are maybe a little bit further off on the horizon, you can actually enter them into Adaptive as kind of your holding space. So you can see, okay, I know that I have this project I want to start maybe after another project or in some years time. So that's really, Adaptive is kind of your all-in-one tool for any of those types. I also have with me Kelly, and also a few folks working behind the scene. I'll let her introduce herself now, though.
Hi, I'm Kelly McGuire. I am part of the enterprise project team working on the implementation of Workday eBuilder and a Workday adaptive planning that we're reviewing today. I previously worked at OSU at the Medical Center, involved in the capital process on a day-to-day basis. I have been working with Kevin and Pear and the Capital Corps on developing Adaptive over the past year. Other persons on the call working with the enterprise project team and will be assisting us in the demo today are Krista Trigg and Rachel Saxa. They'll be troubleshooting and monitoring the chat. Eileen Lehman is the change management lead on the call today. And then we have Rachel Harkness and Chuck Brown, the adaptive implementers on the call. I just want to make a call out that if you have any questions or issues, please post the questions on the chat to everyone so they can be addressed properly and correctly.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have a lot of folks on, so if you try to address it to just one person, there's a chance it might be lost underneath another question. So um, either post it to the rest of the group or bring it up during, we have a couple of breaks for Q&A and things like that. So feel free to bring it up during those times. So just some general setting reminders. We do have a much larger group today, so just try to be attentive and be as active as you can in participating. I know not everyone will get a chance to speak up just because there are so many people, but just try to remove the distractions that you can. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Do not disturb was not on. Turn on your video if you can. It's nice to be able to see anyone who's asking questions, and then just being able to get a face in front of you as well. Ask questions in the chat, and just remember that to post them to everybody so we can see that. And then also share your ideas and feedback as we're working through. So as I mentioned, Adaptive Insights is our kind of all-in-one capital planning tool and also project planning tool that will be replacing the CNI and the FOD intake tool. And we'll be covering a lot of material today. Just have a look at the agenda real quick. We'll be talking about the general business process, navigating, getting around inside of Adaptive, what basic requests will look like. We'll touch on loading requests from a spreadsheet, and because that's a feature that you'll be able to do for those units who may have multiple projects that they enter every year. And we'll also just briefly touch on and give a manual demonstration of what project requests will look like. This is part one of a kind of a two-part training process. This will be just your general overview session, with the second one will be more hands-on and in-depth. So make sure that you keep an eye out for that one. We'll have sessions going into and running through October. So today, the main objectives are here up on the screen. You'll basically be able to describe how capital plan requests move through the new tools. You'll be able to talk about the terminology. There's a lot of new terminology and just verbiage inside of Adaptive, which you'll be learning. So just being able to speak to those and what they all mean. And then also understanding who in the process is responsible for what. There are requesters and approvers as well as the capital core team now. So just understanding what everyone's role is in the new process. So to talk a little bit just generally about what's changing again, the main goal for Adaptive is to just increase uniformity in project requests. So all projects from all OSU entities will be able to flow through this process and then get set up for approval, setup and execution. And this just has a number of multiple benefits, just being able to increase forecasting capabilities, increase our budget accuracy, and then just general efficiency and intake accuracy, making sure that we have our one kind of landing place for projects, regardless of their capital or non-capital. So that's kind of our main goal here today. Talking a little bit about the business process, I'm going to kick over to Kelly for a little bit, who can talk a little bit more about how this system integrates into the other systems.
Thanks, Kevin. So Workday Adaptive Planning is replacing the current CNI tool, as Kevin has said, and it is part of other integrated systems, as you can see above there. Adaptive touches multiple other systems and is a starting point for project requests. Units such as yourselves will be adding requests as part of the capital planning process and also part of the non-capital planning process within your units. Using the various roles, the units will be evaluate each of the requests and update the unit approval status using the various reports to move forward with the capital core approvals, move forward to the capital core approvals. Sorry about that. Adaptive will be used for both requests of above 200,000 and below 200,000. And I think that's important to recognize here. There are two different sheets. Once we get into the system, you'll see there are two different what we call sheets within the version, the yearly version, capital and non-capital sheets. Throughout the year, if there are project requests, they may be managed by the FOD team. These requests will also go through Adaptive and be managed that way. Once they're approved, project requests will then be managed in Workday. So you'll see the project activity, budget, spend, and reporting will all be done in Workday from that point on. Once the approved project requests are added to Workday, no project details are updated in Adaptive. The projects that were not approved in that current fiscal year, they will remain in Adaptive and will be moved forward to the next fiscal year and can be reviewed and updated in that capital planning cycle. If a project is managed in FOD using their eBuilder tool, there are integrations that between Workday and eBuilder that will keep the two systems in sync. Also, at Workday Go Live in January, Adaptive will be the official intake tool for FOD processes for both capital and non-capital project requests, so those above 200,000 and below 200,000. A link will be added to the FOD website for your convenience. In the adaptive request process, we are also asking for the units to add any eBuilder project information that is valuable. These are integral parts for the integrations in the planning tool from year to year. There are also more details about that in the next training session. Also important here is the units will, the units will still have the same time period to enter and approve requests. But if other items come up throughout the year, they will be entered into future capital plans or in the non-capital sheet as appropriate. It will be important to enter these non-capital off-cycle requests in the correct version, and we'll talk about that during the training today. Next slide. So here you see the different capital intake, the business process, and the different roles that you guys have been assigned in the system. So in Adaptive, the security rules that are set up are restrict you as the unit to have access to just your specific unit. Say it is student life or engineering, you will only be able to see those specific levels or project hierarchies in Adaptive. And that is consistent with both the capital and the non-capital. The dates that you guys will be able to be in the system is determined by central administration. So it will be Kevin setting up that those restrictions of the dates. The non-capital should be open to all year round for you guys to enter your project requests. Security access limits you to the level at which you, the individual, can approve as well. Depending on the unit, there may be individuals at all three roles or just one of the roles. If one person is responsible for all three roles, they are assigned to the level 2. So here are our three roles we have in here. The unit project requester, which inputs the request, and then we have the approvers level 1 and level 2, and those as they're going through the review and approval of the unit requests. Once the unit requests are approved, those then move forward to the central and are reviewed by the A&P, BNF, and OAA approvers, and then as well as the Capital Core approvers. Once they're approved by the Capital Core, go through the Board of Trustees approval process, and they're approved, they then get uploaded into Workday. We can go on to the next slide.
There we go. Yep. And just to reiterate some things that were said there, no matter how complex or simple your unit may be in terms of project requesting, Adaptive will be able to suit you. So if you have just kind of one person who is the requester and approver for projects, you'll just be set at the highest level and you'll be able to do it all on your own. If you have someone who requests and then someone who reviews and approves, you can kind of spread those out a little bit. So it really is a flexible tool depending on how complex or simple your processes internally may be. So with that, we're going to jump on to the next poll question here, just to kind of recap what we've heard so far. So what step comes first when requesting an FOD project? All right, got results coming in pretty fast here. Looks like a lot of folks are on the right track. Okay. Let's give it another 15 seconds or so and we'll show the results. Let's see if we can see the results up on the screen now. All right, yeah, so the first step in requesting an FOD project is to get that into Adaptive Insights. I do see some folks who were looking at approving the project request. So, I mean, certainly you could have internal discussions or have decided which projects will be moving forward internally first before entering it into Adaptive. But as far as actually getting it in as an FOD project, the first step is to get it as Adaptive Insights. So I see a question from Brett. Okay, yeah, so Kelly is on that question already. So we'll close this now and then jump to the next slide. Just a real quick break here. We'll take just a minute to see if we have any other questions. There are some questions coming in from chat, but feel free to speak up now if you have any questions about the material we've covered. Yeah, so on the A&P, BNF, and OAA approvers, that's very similar to the Capital Core team that we have right now, which is made up of varying folks across campus every year. That looks Kelly's got the answer in there. All right, if there's no other questions, we're just going to jump right into navigating Adaptive, starting with just general login and navigation. So there's a link here you can follow, and I'm going to actually share my screen so everybody can.
Kevin, I'm going to ask if anybody needs the link. If so, I can put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Eileen. Mm-hmm. She's ahead of the game.
Okay, I'm going to switch my share so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so you should hopefully see my browser window now. So once you follow that link, it'll take you to this Workday adaptive planning website. There was actually an update over the weekend where they changed a bunch of stuff, so I'm getting used to the new verbiage myself. So from this page, it's actually very important. It's very easy to get tripped up right on this first page. So in order to log in, you need to put your OSU email address here, not just your name.number. Make sure you get your full name.number and at osu.edu. And then once you hit submit there, it'll take you to the OSU single logon page where you'll get your Duo authentication. I already did mine today, so it'll take me right into Adaptive. But if you haven't logged in, it'll send you your normal Duo request and get you logged in. I mentioned there was an update over the weekend, so I'm getting this friendly, nice little splash screen saying, hey, there's a bunch of new stuff. I don't care, so I'm gonna go to my homepage. And this is what everyone should see. We're going to take a break here just to make sure that everyone can log in. We'll take a couple of seconds. Go ahead and if you can, you should have an option in Zoom where you can give a check mark for yes or red X for no. So just take a second. We'll let everyone get logged into the system here and address anybody who's having issues. And I'm going to lean on my facilitators here to just make sure, looking through the chat, it looks like we have at least one. Okay, so Brett's in. Looks like we have at least one. Carla Zadnik looks like she might be having some issues. So I'll lean on my team here to take care of those while I start just kind of showing you generally around the system here. Just starting with general navigation of the system. Close my participants window in my chat so I have more screen real estate here. So yeah, the adaptive insights, or I guess Workday adaptive, as I need to get used to calling it now, is pretty simple to get around, starting with just general navigation. You can see this W with the orange half circle here. This is your main navigation tool. Once you click this, it'll show you a little sidebar, which shows you all of the different things that you have access to. Important note here that what you see and have access to is based on your role. And since I have a higher administrative role, I'll have some options here that you don't see. So if what you see is not exactly matching here, don't worry about it. It just means that your role is slightly different than mine. So this will be the primary way that you get around and jump between the different options. You can also see these little side arrows. They can take you to different sheets and kind of sub pages within those main sections. Yeah, so and we're actually going to jump right to sheets to give you an example. So as Kelly mentioned earlier, there are two main sheets. One is for capital requests and one is for non-capital requests. You can see this is how you would select between them now. So these are the main sheets that are available for you, and these will be available in every version. So versions are in the top right corner here. It's a little drop-down box. And the way that OSU will be handling versions is basically every fiscal year, there will be a new project request version. So for fiscal year 22 projects, when you log into the system, make sure that you're logging in and checking the right version. Also, as Kelly mentioned, depending on what type of request you're making, so if it's a capital request, you'll know that every year I'll send an email out to all of the users across campus who are doing capital planning saying, hey, we're starting a new capital planning year. You have until Thanksgiving to get in your new project requests. And the way that works in the system is basically the sheet for capital requests will be, once we kind of hit that deadline, I'll go in and I'll lock the sheet down so that the capital core team can start reviewing requests and requesting more information and that. But the non-capital requests are open year round. You should be able to enter in projects year round. See a question in chat. When do you? Looks like we've got some. Is the non-capital project request sheet maybe locked for visibility right now? I'm seeing some questions coming in about that. Not sure if that's something where maybe there's a permission issue. It looks like we have a few people saying that, so.
Right now, this is Kelly. Right now, we have the non-capital sheets locked because they aren't going to be used until January. So you will not see this. You will not see the non-capital sheet. You'll be the capital sheet will be available to you.
Okay. Yeah. So that goes back to. Sorry,
yeah, the same columns will be in the non-capital sheet as the capital sheet, and it's used exactly the same way.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's one of those things where just because I have a different access, I see it and you may not. So, but once that goes live, you'll be able to see both of those sheets here. And as I was mentioning, so there'll be a version for the real project data. There'll be a version for every fiscal year. But for today, we're actually going to be in the test data for training. So I'm actually going to select that version. You can see that just did a little refresh, and now the test data for training version is selected up here. So another thing that Adaptive has that is really helpful compared to especially the CNI system, which was just, you needed to know what you were doing once you got in here. The Adaptive Insights has kind of a context sensitive help menu here. So depending on where you are, and I don't think you'll be able to see the new window that this opened, but basically this will open a new window and say, it'll basically walk you through whatever you're trying to do based on the page that you are. So I'll say that the Workday help function is actually very useful compared to other systems I've used, which is just a general, here's a boilerplate information about the system. It's actually, there are helpful how-tos and guides in there that will be helpful as you work through the system. The next thing I wanted to touch on, so I'm going to jump into very quickly just before I stop for a second. I'm going to jump into the capital projects request sheet just to show you something else for the org structure and levels. So depending on what your what organization you're with, you'll be able to see different projects. So this levels drop-down box is your kind of primary tool for moving around that. So right now, since I'm a Capital Core reviewer, administrator, I can see all requests for every unit. But say, just for instance, you were with Student Life, you could go in here and just start typing that, and then this will start giving you the results here. So depending on what different security level you are, whether you're a requester or a approver. So say you were like a Student Life approver, you would be able to see all requests for Student Life. However, if you were a Student Life, maybe you were with Student Life Housing, you were just a requester for Student Life Housing, you would only have access to the Student Life Housing requests that you were entering. So that's important. So maybe if you're an approver and you know someone entered a project and you're not seeing it, make sure that you're at the highest level that you have access to see, because it might be hidden under a different level. So we touched on sheets already. Just want to make sure that I'm not covering too much too fast. So I think the last thing I want to cover in this brief overview here is just these project dimensions and attributes. So these basically are just the fields which you as users will be able to log in as enter. So some of them will be yes, no type things, and some of them will be drop downs for a different list. So these are dimensions and attributes within the sheet, which is driven based on what level you're seeing as well as what version you're looking at. So those are kind of the key terminology fields that you need to know about. I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint because that's just the general overview. So we just touched on what version you should be in and looked at. So if maybe you're seeing a project that, or you're not seeing a project that you entered, it could be for a number of reasons. You're either in an older version or just the incorrect version. You may not have you may not be at the right level, so you may be drilled down too far to see it if it's maybe in a different level. There are different sheets depending on the type of project request that you're doing. And then within the sheets, there are dimensions, which are the fields which you'll actually be in here and editing. So any questions on kind of those four key areas now? Just checking to see if I have any private chats for questions to me. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is just run through some of the basic project request details. So now that we're in this sheet, we'll run through very quickly some of the key concepts and fields that you'll be responsible for entering, just because it is a little bit different than the capital request process now. So starting off over here at the left, and just to talk a little bit more about this sheet, this functions very similarly to an Excel spreadsheet, just available here in your browser. So if you select, I'm actually gonna go to the top level here again. Let Adaptive render. So clicking on any of these column headers will sort your projects alphabetically. So you can just see I selected on project hierarchy and it sorted them by alphabet here. Project. So there's one kind of weird, I wouldn't even say weird, it's a little bit of a quirky thing about adaptive. It's the way that you need to name project requests. And the only reason I'm going to take a second to talk about this here is that it's a key integration field in order for the projects within Workday Adaptive to talk to all of the other systems. So the project request, if you look closely, you'll actually see that the project request field is actually just kind of the request ID. Let me make these a little larger so you can see. Is just the request ID plus the request description. So, and that's just the way that Adaptive kind of creates your key unique name for the project. So this is actually what other systems will use to reference this line inside of Adaptive. So when you're entering projects, it might make more logical sense to generate your request ID, name your project, and then just smash them together to get the project request. This is a little bit different from the CNI system where you enter the project request and then it assigns a CNI number. Now you need to know that you're entering an ABA project in this fiscal year. Here's the project name, and then you generate the project request. So it's a little bit backwards from how it currently exists in the CNI. So running across here, I'm only going to stop on some of these key fields where they integrate to other systems because most of these are just generally self-descriptive. So the business justification is just enter your project description. What are you hoping to achieve? What are the goals? Why do you need this project to be done? And how is it going to help your unit achieve what it needs to do? So there are some fields in here that will that'll help you as you enter. So if you're entering a cost center, you'll be able to enter this cost center number will auto generate based on what you enter here and vice versa. If you know your cost center, you can auto generate here. So those are kind of tied together. Request type is another key field just because it drives some calculations later. If you select this, you'll see that there's a little drop down box that you'll be able to fill out what project type it is. And this will drive some calculations.
Kevin, can we go back for 1 second?
Mm-hmm.
So cost center, I just want to hit on this. These are the cost centers that are currently being mapped in Workday. They are not your current cost centers that you are using on a daily basis. Those will be changing once we get to Workday. So just a little heads up on that, which is why we did for the cost center description, if you start typing in what your cost center is, the description of it, you'll get a list and you can choose from that and then go back to the cost center number. Yep. So then if you go back to the cost center number, it will provide the related cost center for you.
Yeah. So
this will help you in the future, just kind of navigating through here.
Yeah.
Because it's all going to be new. So
yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep, no problem. Location is if you're doing a project on a building, this will have a drop-down box for, this is similar to the systems now where it'll have an option to pick your building here. So if you're doing something on Ackerman, you can type Ackerman and it'll give you, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but it also lets you drill down into individual floors. So if you wanted to keep track and say, I'm doing something on Ackerman 600 on the first floor, you have the ability to select either the building itself or an individual floor. So that it's just nice that it lets you do that level of detail. Some of these other fields are pretty self-explanatory, talking about whether or not the project is a replacement for something else, whether or not it generates new revenue or increased operating costs. The next field I want to stop and touch on for a second is these e-builder fields. So throughout the process, if you entered in a project request for an if you enter a project request that you need to have a project cost estimate done on, what you need to do is you enter the project just as you normally would. And when you get to these fields over here, you make sure that obviously, yes, you'll enter the project is managed in eBuilder and that, yes, you do need an eBuilder estimate. And then what this kind of does is this triggers a report that relies on these two fields to generate a report where FOD says, okay, I have these list of new projects that the users have indicated that they need an estimate. And that's actually what they use to kind of kick off their process in order to generate you an estimate. And then once they do that, they'll send it to you and they'll generate it, and then you can upload the estimate here. Through that process, it'll also be assigned an eBuilder project number, and then it'll have an estimate date. So you can, once you have the estimate, you can actually upload it, the link to it directly in here, so that as we're working through our process, we're able to pull that without needing to go somewhere different. Did I miss anything else on that, Kelly, or did that pretty much cover that? Yeah, so that's good. Targeted fiscal year is another kind of key field. This is how we within the capital core will know which capital plan year you're targeting for the project to start in. So for this FY22 year, for every project that you want to be included in the FY22 plan, you need to ensure that you have targeted fiscal year as 2022 in here. And that's how we'll know as we go through and do our filtering and reporting that, okay, this unit has entered a project that they want to start in 22. This would be similar to, for those capital plan users, this would be kind of similar to start in current fiscal year. There was a box, if you remember, that's fine if you don't, but there's a box that says, do you wish this project to start in the current fiscal year? You would hit yes. This is similar to that. Make sure that you have the right fiscal year in here. There's some fields here to just say when you want the project to start and when do you think it'll end. And then there's another nice little field here, which allows you to say, say you have a group of projects that are kind of related, but you need to enter them as different projects for whatever reason. You can actually indicate whether projects are related to other projects within Adaptive. So if you have a project that maybe needs to happen before another project, you can actually indicate that this is a sequential project and this is the first in a line. And then once you indicate that, you can actually just enter the project request ID here. And that's useful if you wanted to generate, if we, for instance, wanted to generate a report and say, what are all of our dependent projects? You know, what projects are relying on some other project? That just gives us the ability to report on that if we wanted to.
Also with that, Kevin, you could put in, if there was an FOD project or another project, non-FOD, that has already been started and you have that project number, you can put that in there as well. So like this would be dependent on or follow the FOD project.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I know on some of the larger construction projects, you might have an enabling or an infrastructure project that you know that's taking place. You can actually enter that in, even if it's not a project inside of your unit. If it's FOD project, you can enter that project request here, and that would give us kind of a nice visualization of what projects are happening first.
Yes.
There is a project scoring tool. We won't touch on that today, but it's a nice little tool you can build for prioritizing projects. And then kind of finally into the project, just general project information is the unit approval status. So this is where you would enter. So if you had someone who was entering projects and someone who was reviewing projects, this is where you would indicate the current status of that. So if you did have multiple people where one person is submitting and one person is approving, the person submitting would enter the project details, and once they were done, they'd hit submitted. And then you would be able to see the approver would be able to go in and see, okay, these projects are submitted, they're ready for review. If you're just the person who's submitting and approving, you could enter it in and mark it as approved. It's important here. So this is kind of the other main field that we will look at when the capital core team is reviewing projects. We will only look at projects which have been marked by the unit as approved. So you can enter in all of your projects for, you know, going off into years into the future. But if you want a project to be included in the capital plan, it not only needs to be indicated that you want it to start in the current capital plan year, it needs to be approved by the unit. So this is just as you're working towards that cutoff date, usually it's the Thanksgiving timeframe. As you're working through that, you need to make sure that your goal is make sure that you have the projects that you want to start approved by your unit, so that as we are working through, we know what we need to be looking at. Okay. The last couple of fields here get into really just the financials of the project. So you'll have your unit cost, which for most construction projects is just the total project cost. We have this split this way. So if for like the medical center, as an example, if they're buying 4 MRI machines that are, you know, X $100,000 each, they can say these machines are this amount of money and we're getting this many of them. And these two fields here will be used to calculate the total project cost. It's just the product of those two things. You can also see, I just want to take a second to briefly talk about, you can see that these fields here are actually grayed out, and you can actually see as you hover over them that it says locked and it's a read-only column. If you wanted to go in here and try to edit this, it'll stop you because this is grayed out columns indicate that this is actually a calculated column in this instance. So you don't have access to edit this box directly. You would have to go back to the ones that it rely on, which are these ones over here. So if you see a gray column or something's not letting you edit, that's one of the reasons that you might get tripped up. So you'll also see that there's a variance here, which will be relying on some fields that are a little bit later. And we're not going to dive too much into this today, just because this will be a significant portion of what we're talking about in our hands-on and in-depth session. But you're able to indicate the project funding sources individually, and for more complex projects, be able to indicate multiple funding sources. But so that's where this is here, kind of at the end. The sheet will also auto estimate expenses year by year, but then you can see these are just funding by year, and that's it until the end. One last thing before I wrap up this demo is you'll notice that some of these fields start with asterisks, and especially as you get towards the end here, there'll be all asterisk columns. These are fields that the Capital Core team and approvers use to keep track of various other things. So once you get to the end here and you see asterisk columns, you know that you're done entering your information, and it's up to the Capital Core team to fill in the rest. So if you see an asterisk column like that, you'll know that I don't need to worry about it, just move to the next column.
Also with that, Kevin, so if we were to look at the non-capital sheet, you will only see 1 year of funding and expense, and none of the other columns after that would be on the non-capital sheets. So everything from the funding year over would be not be on the non-capital sheet.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the overview of the project. The project's project intake and entering, the project request overview. Now we're going to take another, we're going to do another quick poll question here. I know that was a lot of information and it was probably a little bit scatterbrained, but we're going to do another poll here just to try to gauge your knowledge here. So a few questions that we'll run through is a financial scenario for a fiscal year is a what? So this would be what differentiates between the different fiscal years, and the options here are version, dimension, sheet, or workbook. Second question, what determines the level of information that you can see? A couple of different options here. And the last question is, which of these is not true of a sheet? And this is and then there's one more question way down at the bottom. And this is just a true or false question. A dimension has a list of possible values to categorize data. So we'll give maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes here for you to answer the poll question, then we'll continue right along. And I do see that we still have some questions and access issues in the chat. Making sure that I'm not missing any questions that were directed to me.
I'm gonna Kaufman.382. I did update your access, so it should be correct. If it's not, I'll need to further investigate that, but your access does show that. And Hagenberg.1, I do show you in College of Engineering. So if you're still not seeing that, if you refresh your page.
I see a question from Brian as well about whether projects are being transitioned or adaptive, or whether this is a fresh start. And that's actually a really great question, and something that we internally discussed for quite some time. What the planning office will be doing is I will be pulling a C&I report, which is basically, here's all of the project details that you have currently in the C&I system. And I'll be sending that, I'll be doing one of those for everybody who has projects in the system currently. And I'll be sending that out to all of the groups for review internally. I think at this point, now that the CNI system's been around for 8 years, there are a lot of requests that are either old, or maybe they are duplicates, or maybe they were wrapped up in another project and they're actually finished and you don't need them anymore. So we're going to be moving forward with Adaptive as a fresh start. I'll give you a report that shows you what you currently have in the system, but as far as entering projects in, it'll be a brand new fresh start.
And you'll have better visibility in the following years, looking at your capital plan or requests that you had entered in the prior year, and updating the dollars and the estimates and things like that.
Yeah. All right, we'll give maybe another 15 seconds here, and then we'll wrap up the poll and go over the answers. And I'm just trying to see if I still have the things here. Okay. Let's go ahead and wrap up the polling now, and then we'll go over the answers. So this first one is a little bit, it looks like we had some split decisions here. So the thing that Adaptive uses for determining a financial scenario for a fiscal year is the version. So the version, and I'll actually switch back to the web page so you can see it here. So the version is what you will use to select between different fiscal years. So when you're entering projects for FY22 capital projects, you will enter that in the FY22 version. So sheets are common across versions, and I want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly, because it's easy to get this confused, but every version will have the same sheets within it. The version is actually what we use to determine what fiscal year a project will be taking place. Okay, the next question looks like the majority of folks got right. So yeah, what will determine the information you can see is the level that you've been assigned. So if you're a student life approver, you should be able to see all of the student life kind of sub levels. But if you are a student life housing submitter, you should only be able to see the student life housing projects. Next question is, which of these is not true of a sheet? That looks like, again, majority of the folks got it right. Sheets are, there will be sheets for both capital and non-capital requests. And the last question, true or false, again, looks like everyone got this, most everyone got this right. The dimension will have the drop downs, and it gives you the list of possible answers, which we use in reports. Reports and categorizing data. Okay. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. Let me switch back over to my spreadsheet. Yep, and I see a question in chat to send out the slides after the session. I can definitely send out the PowerPoint presentation for the group to review. So as I mentioned, Adaptive also has the ability to load projects directly from a spreadsheet. So what you would essentially do, and we can touch on this in the hands-on training a little bit more. I think we have that on the syllabus for that. But what this basically lets you do for maybe users who enter, you know, a dozen or more projects every capital plan year, you can actually download a blank template from Adaptive, and then fill in the details into Excel. And then through this process, Adaptive can just pull those project details in and add them to your capital plan sheet directly. So that's kind of a time save for you if you don't want to go in line by line and enter multiple projects. It lets you do that. Just another tool for maybe some more of the advanced users who may want to utilize that. And I'll just take, I'm just going to switch back and show you where that would be. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to do an import right now just because that would take quite a bit of time, but I just want to show you where that functionality would be. Oops. Did I? Oh. Click on the wrong thing. Is this different? Oh, yeah. So okay, yeah. This might have been one of the things that changed with the update. Normally, when I click that, it would bring me to a different page. But yeah, you can see that there's an import data field here where you can see there's a template that you can download and enter your project info, and then you can enter it into a directly into a version and into a sheet. So you can, and that's how that would function. Whoops, I ended my share. I go back to my. Okay. Okay, so yeah, just to touch on level again briefly here. What you can see is restricted by your college, then your unit, then your group. So depending on where you are and what level you're assigned, it determines what projects that you can see. I also have a note here to talk about what data shouldn't be stored in the system just from a security perspective, and what data levels can be stored here. I think I'll let Kelly talk a little bit about the S2 data here, just very briefly, just as a reminder, just to go over that.
So yes, S2 data. So I'll take the yearly quizzes and updates on our Buckeye Learn regarding data and data security. The adaptive is only an S2 system, so you cannot put S4 data in here. I don't know why we would put S4 data in here, but this is strictly an S2 system. I don't know what else to say about that, but
Nope,
does anybody have any questions about the S2, S4 data?
Yeah, and that's more, if you review your annual training, it goes into a little bit more about what those data types and, but basically just based on the access to the system, don't be entering your credit card information in here, things like that.
Very good.
No social security numbers, things like that. This is
Yep.
A system that has access by a lot of people. So basically whatever you are comfortable entering into a project request or a CNI is what should be in here. And then I'll refer back to that, the annual security training for more particulars and questions. Okay. So we're going to take another quick break here to talk about questions. I know that we still have questions coming into the chat, but also if anybody just wants to chime in with questions or suggestions or requests for clarifications, things like that, we'll take a minute here to just go over that. Looks like a majority of the chat has been just making sure everybody's assigned to the correct level so that they can see the right thing. Yeah, and I'll just also take a moment here to remind everybody that there is a second training session, which will be the using the Workday adaptive system for planning, which is where we'll actually get everybody logged into the system, and you'll actually be hands-on and entering a project request and going over how to add funding sources and all of that. So that wouldn't be for the people who are interested in, I want to get hands-on, let's actually get in there and start doing this. Make sure that you have signed up to one of those classes. We'll be doing those, I think, there'll be courses available, I think, twice a week, pretty much into October. So make sure that you log into your Buckeye Learn and get ready for that second training. So I see. No, I think we'll be entering just practice test data into the system in our next session. So just come with a sample. I mean, it could be based on a real project, but with just made up numbers. We'll be entering into the test data sheet. So it'll just be just for testing purposes. So just come with an idea of a type of project that you would enter. And then the system will be open for FY22 requests as soon as we set that up. I believe pretty much as soon as you complete your second training, the FY22 sheet will be open and available for folks to start entering. And that will be also the time that I mentioned I was going to send out a list of current CNI entries in the system for you to review internally before deciding what projects you want to re-enter back into adaptive. Okay. Yeah, so in the test data for training, we'll have sample data for each unit, for example. So when you log in and see your test data, you should see at least one sample project, which you'll be able to go and view as an example as you're working through. Okay. All right, so yeah, just some general tips and tricks in the system here. Just another reminder of the importance of levels, making sure that you have the correct one so that, you know, if you're the one who's approving projects for your unit, making sure that you have that highest approver 2 level so that you're able to approve those correctly so that they're included in the capital plan. Sheets are common to all of the versions. So for every fiscal year, there will be a capital and non-capital sheet. Capital project requests that were not approved will carry forward into future versions. So you don't have to worry about re-entering the same requests every year if you're doing longer term planning. Reminder that while you're working in the sheets that some of them will be open text fields and some of them will have a drop down for you to choose from. And that if there's a grayed out column or something that isn't letting you edit it, it's probably a calculated field, and just making sure that you're entering stuff where you should be.
Also, we do have documentation on the different columns and what it's used for and the drop-down fields. I'm not sure, Eileen, if that was part of what went out, but I can make sure that that's available to everybody.
It is available on the Administrative Resource Center. I'll put that link in the chat.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and that's actually the next slide. So for additional help or for great resources such as that sheet that Kelly just mentioned, the Administrative Resources Center is a really good resource for getting information and tools like that are helpful for these training sessions. So as far as next steps, really just once we get all logins sorted and access levels correct, log into the Adaptive Insights, just poke around a little bit, maybe have a look at the help tool. I want to stress that as far as help tool goes is actually helpful rather than frustrating, as some systems I've worked with have been. Enroll in our next session. So as far as entering projects and really getting into the tool for requesters, the next session will be the real meat of the training. And then also bring questions based on your individual unit processes. No 2 units will have the exact same process for how they transfer from a person who has a project request to someone actually submitting it into a system to a unit approver, CFO, or whomever that may be actually approving the project for inclusion in a capital plan. So just think about how you request projects currently, and then come with questions about how adaptive will suit your individual needs, as that is what will make the best and most informative sessions for you all. And that is actually the end of our training session. So we finished right around an hour. We can take another couple of seconds here to answer any more questions or comments here. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Are the training sessions currently open on Buckeye Learn currently? It looks like none of the scheduled next trainings are open on my
Yes,
calendar.
they are open, and they are now called Using Workday Adaptive Planning. The name just changed yesterday. So if you are looking for them, you can search for Using Workday Adaptive Planning or use the event calendar if you don't see them on your transcript.
And I think we have a kind of set, like a Tuesday and a Thursday time for those. It looks like there's at least one, maybe a couple of different calendar conflicts. Do we know if we'll be doing any kind of off of our normal Tuesday, Thursday cycle, maybe like a special?
I do know we have at least one Wednesday in October, and I think we looked into a Monday, but if we hear a lot that we need to have one more different day of the week, we could look at that.
Yeah. And will the second training sessions be, the second training session really is hands-on and is probably best done in person where you can have the hands-on help. But will there be a recording of any of the second sessions? Just my general curiosity.
I don't think we've decided that yet. It is generally, the material that's in it is more about demonstration and practice. So the demonstrations could certainly be posted as independent ones.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I know that I just hit you with a tidal wave of new information and you're looking at a system you've probably never seen before. So thanks for your patience and thanks for your questions. We'll, for anybody who was having issues getting access or maybe didn't have the right levels assigned to them, we'll make sure that we get those sorted out before our next in-depth session. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email the group here and we'll make sure that we get it sorted. So thank you all and have a great lunch. It looks like we're right at 12.
Thank you.